The following program is being shortwaved overseas by the Armed Forces Radio Service.
Colgate, Colgate presents Bill Stern.
With the Colgate Shave Cream Sports Newsreel.
Bill Stern, the Colgate Shave Cream Man, is on the air. Bill Stern, the Colgate Shave Cream Man, with stories rare. Take his advice and you'll look keen. You'll get a shave that's smooth and clean. You'll be a Colgate brushless fan.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Bill Stern bringing you the 302nd edition of the Colgate Shave Cream Sports Newsreel. Our guest tonight is one of the most famous Americans alive in person, Captain Eddie Rickenbacker. But first, real one. Sure. He's dizzy, but he pulled off no less than 27 baseball victories last season. I'm speaking of that pitching ace, Dizzy Trout of the Detroit Tigers.
But there's nothing daffy about Dizzy Trout's shaving habits. He uses Colgate brushless shave cream. And reporting to Bill Stern, he writes, "It was the happiest morning for me when I first used Colgate shave cream. I smooth it on, I shave it off. That's all. It sure has plenty on the ball. Speed, comfort, results. You can tell your listeners, Bill, that this baseball player thinks Colgate brushless shave cream is immense. Regards from Dizzy Trout."
Stars of a dozen different sports use Colgate brushless, which is why it's called the shave cream of champions. Like these famous champs, you probably have wiry whiskers and a dry, sensitive skin. Well, Colgate brushless is made especially for that combination. It softens your tough whiskers down to the skin line so that your razor cuts close and clean without snagging or pulling, and no after irritation. Then, Colgate brushless rinses off your razor and skin in a flash. And listen, my friends, if you don't find Colgate brushless shave cream is a minimum of bother and a maximum of shaving pleasure, then just send the top of the carton to me, Bill Stern, care of Colgate, Jersey City, Zone 2, New Jersey. And I'll see that you get double your money back. Get the jumbo jar of Colgate brushless shave cream and get it tonight. Reel 2. Portrait of Captain Eddie Rickenbacker. Today, one of the most famous men in America is Captain Eddie Rickenbacker. He's so famous that 20th Century Fox has just made a moving picture of his life, and they've called this great picture Captain Eddie. But did you ever realize why Eddie Rickenbacker is so famous? The answer can be told in newspaper headlines. Newspaper headlines that began back in 1913 when newsboys on the street were shouting,
Husty, Eddie Rickenbacker sets new speed record. Eddie Rickenbacker wins 8th straight auto race. Read all about it, mister. Get your paper. Eddie Rickenbacker.
Eddie Rickenbacker went on to become one of the most famous automobile racers of his day, but that was only the beginning. He became America's leading flyer in World War I. New York City gave him a tumultuous reception when he arrived home. The United States gave him the Congressional Medal of Honor. He built the Rickenbacker automobile. He became president and general manager of Eastern Airlines. He was an airplane crash in Atlanta. He was lost for 23 days in the Pacific Ocean. But Eddie Rickenbacker survived everything. Until today, his dramatic life story has just been made into a great movie. And yet, you know, of all the experiences in his life, the most dramatic experience is probably the least known, for it's a story that goes back to the days just before the First World War, when Eddie was a racing driver, a great driver. And on this particular day, when our story begins, Eddie Rickenbacker was racing his car at Santa Monica, California. It was a terrific race, and as the race reached its final stages, Eddie Rickenbacker was in first place. He was doing better than 100 miles an hour. And then it happened. A tiny youngster ran out on the track. The child was frightened. The crowd watched in horror, for bearing down on the helpless child was Eddie Rickenbacker's car. At that very instant, Eddie saw that child out in front of his car, and he realized that he either had to run over that child or swerve into a brick wall at the side of the track. Instantly, Eddie made his choice. He swerved his car and crashed into the brick wall. Eddie Rickenbacker's car turned over 3 times. It caught fire, and Eddie was almost killed. But he finally recovered. He recovered from one of the most horrible auto smash-ups ever seen on a racetrack. A smash-up caused by Eddie Rickenbacker saving a tiny child's life. Maybe you'd be interested in knowing who that child was whose life Eddie Rickenbacker saved. That child has since grown up. Today you know him as the famous movie star, Fred MacMurray. Strange, isn't it, that Eddie Rickenbacker should risk his own life to save the life of Fred MacMurray. But it's much stranger when you realize that Fred MacMurray, the very boy whose life Eddie Rickenbacker once saved, is today playing the part of Eddie Rickenbacker in the movie of Rickenbacker's life. Portrait of Eddie Rickenbacker, whose life is being played on the screen by the very boy whose life he once saved. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here is Eddie Rickenbacker himself in person.
Thank you, Bill. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
How does it feel, Eddie, to see yourself played up on the screen by someone else?
It seems strange, but I would like to compliment Fred McMurray on the splendid job of playing me in the movie of my life.
Eddie, why do they call the picture Captain Eddie?
It is a nickname that has stuck to me since World War I, Bill.
What part of the picture, Eddie, do you enjoy the most?
Well, naturally, it was all interesting to me since it was my own life. But I think I enjoyed the auto race scenes the best.
How come, Eddie?
Because they brought back such great memories of my early days as an auto racer. There were some great men raced in those days, too, Bill.
Yes, I guess they were. Who were they, Eddie?
Well, the two Chevrolet brothers, Barney Oldfield, Henry Ford, Guy Vaughan, and a singer named Caruso, Enrico Caruso.
Enrico Caruso. Eddie, will auto racing come back after this war?
Yes, Bill, it will. As a matter of fact, I plan to reopen the Indianapolis Motor Speedway next year, as usual, on May the 30th.
Well, that's swell. Now, let's get back to this movie, Captain Eddie, that's just come out, that's based on your own life. Doesn't it make you awfully proud to think that they've made a movie about you?
Naturally, Bill. But you know, for 30 years, I've been against their making a picture of my life.
Well, then how come you finally let them go and do it?
Because I thought that right now it would serve a definite purpose. To show the youth of America what a great land of opportunity this is. For after all, if I can do those things, so can any other American boy.
Thank you so much. Good luck and good night. Captain Eddie Rickenbacker.
Good night, Bill.
Good night, Eddie. Reel 3. Living Legends on Parade. Last week on this program, we did a story called Living Legends on Parade. It was a story of the great women athletes of this country who, even though they are alive, are forgotten, and the response was tremendous. People from all over the nation wrote in, wired in, asking that we repeat the idea, and everybody expressed the same thought. We must not forget those great names. So in response to a nationwide demand, we repeat Living Legends on Parade. Only we're going to make one change tonight. Last week, we remembered the famous women athletes. Tonight, let's recall the famous men athletes. Famous men who are alive and yet forgotten. There's quite a parade of them. Let's see how many you remember as we begin our Living Legends on Parade. Our parade begins in California. Here an old-timer sits and dreams his dreams of better days. Of days when many said he was the greatest fighter in the world. Who can ever forget when he came blazing out of the West to write bloody history with his fists? But now, he's forgotten. A lonely old man who once was the greatest heavyweight champion of the world. His name, Jim Jeffries. But let's move on. Now we're beside a tennis court. Here's another Californian surely you must remember. Once he revolutionized the game of tennis with this slashing, smashing type of game. It was he who won the Davis Cup for America back in 1914. Do you remember? Twice he won the American title. Once the British title. The Australian title. He won them all. He was America's first great tennis champion. I wonder what he's thinking of now. Perhaps of another day, when the greatest name in tennis was Maurice McLoughlin. But let's start moving across the country. Our next stop is Nebraska. See that man behind the plow? You don't recognize him, do you? Well, you should. Once he made baseball history. He won the World Series of 1926. He's in the Hall of Fame now. They said he'd never forgotten. But recently he was working in a freak show. He's forgotten today, forgotten as though he'd never lived. But once people called him the most famous ball player of all time. You see, his name is Grover Cleveland Alexander. The parade moves on. Not too long ago, a youngster won his first important golf match on the banks of the Swanee River. Today, that youngster's forgotten. 30 years ago, they called him the boy wonder of golf. He was only 19 years old then, and he became the youngest golfer in the whole wide world to ever win the famous United States Open Golf Championship. Now, 18 years later, when they said he was through, he staged a comeback. Yeah, he came back to win still another United States Golf Championship. Yeah. Today, I wonder how many of you remember him at all. You should, for his name is Francis Ouimet. Memories of the great names that can never be forgotten from yesteryear. Our parade's almost finished now. There's only one more stop. The United States Merchant Marine. They don't generally take old men into the Merchant Marine, but they took him, and he's old. It's been a long time since his name flashed across the sports world. Once he was the greatest football player of them all. He was the greatest track star, too. He won the Olympic Games single-handed. He set more world records than any man who's ever lived. Surely you must remember America's greatest athlete of all time. His name, Jim Thorpe. But that's enough. By now you get the idea. They're just living legends. Flitting figures of another age, alive and yet forgotten. No, not quite forgotten. For as long as records are written and men are remembered, they can never die. Never die, even though today they are only living legends on parade. Reel 4, Charles F. McCarthy.
What do you do with your old razor blade, said a man to a Scotch friend. I shave with them, replied the Scotchman. Well, this is a good time to remark that Colgate Brushless Shave Cream is one swell working mate for any razor. Here is a light, fluffy cream that spreads over your skin like liquid velvet. It takes tough whiskers in its stride, keeps them soft so your razor can shear them off as easy as fuzz. Notice that Colgate Brushless doesn't dry out, doesn't draw your skin, doesn't smart or sting. No, sir. It kisses your face goodbye, leaving it smooth, refreshed, and comfortable. Then, jiffy quick, Colgate Brushless rinses off your face and razor. That, my brother shavers, is champion performance. Yours when you use Colgate Brushless Shave Cream, the shave cream of champions. And now, back to Bill Stern.
Reel 6. Colgate's candid camera catches the story behind the story. New York City. The recent fist fight between the world's heavyweight champion Joe Louis and the famous orchestra leader Cab Calloway was strictly a gag. There were no punches thrown. Chicago, Illinois. American Olympic officials are considering inviting Japs and Germans to participate in the next Olympic Games. How do you like that? In fact, they plan inviting the very Japs and Germans who turned our sports stars into gold stars. And that's the 3-0 mark for tonight. Next Friday night, we'll be back, same time, same stations, with another edition of the Colgate Shave Cream Sports Newsreel. Our guest next Friday evening will be one of the most famous baseball players of all time, the immortal Ty Cobb. So be sure and be with us next Friday night at our usual time when we present as our guest in person the never-to-be-forgotten Ty Cobb. See you then. And until then, I'll be seeing you on the screen in the News of the Day newsreel at your favorite Lowe's or Associated Theaters. Now, until this very same time next Friday night, this is Bill Stern for Colgate Shave Cream, wishing you all a good night.
Bill Stern, the Colgate Shave Cream Man, is on his way. Bill Stern, the Colgate Shave Cream Man, had lots to say. He told you tales of sports heroes, the inside dope he really knows. So listen in next Friday night. Colgate.
Eddie Rickenbacker's picture, titled Captain Eddie, is now playing at the Roxy Theater in New York.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.